Cadet Jake Thompson stood at the entrance of the Galactic Defense Academy's main hall, his hands shaking slightly as he straightened his crisp blue uniform. The massive doors towered above him, made from some alien metal that seemed to shift colors in the light. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The sight that greeted him was beyond anything he had imagined during his journey from Earth. The hall stretched out like a cathedral, but instead of pews, there were floating platforms and crystalline structures that pulsed with their own inner light, and everywhere he looked, there were aliens. The Veltar were impossible to miss. These beings stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies made entirely of what looked like living diamond. Light passed through them in strange patterns, creating rainbow effects on the walls around them. Jake could hear them talking, but their voices sounded like wind chimes mixed with the crack of breaking glass. Small translation devices attached to their necks converted their words into something Jake could understand. Another batch of softskins, one of them was saying, diamond facets of his face catching the light as he turned toward the human group. They look even weaker than the last ones. Jake felt his cheeks burn, but he kept walking forward. Behind him, he could hear his fellow human recruits whispering nervously. There were only 12 humans in this year's class compared to hundreds of alien cadets from dozens of different species. Commander Veltar Nixora approached their group with slow and deliberate steps. Each footstep rang out like a hammer hitting an anvil. The commander's crystalline form was even more impressive up close, with intricate patterns carved into his diamond skin that seemed to tell some kind of story. His eyes were too brilliant, blue gems that seemed to look right through Jake. "Humans," the commander began, his translated voice carrying a tone that Jake recognized immediately as disappointment. "Your species shows promise in theoretical studies, but physical conditioning remains questionable." Jake glanced sideways at his teammates. Beth Miller, a former Marine from Texas, looked like she wanted to punch something. Ryan Clark, who had been a college football player before joining the program, was clenching his jaw so hard, Jake worried he might crack a tooth. Lisa Park, the group's top scorer in tactical analysis, just stared straight ahead with a blank. The expression that Jake knew meant she was furious. Floating near the ceiling, the energy-based Luxani drifted in lazy circles. These beings looked like living auroras, their forms constantly shifting between different colors and patterns. They were amused, Jake had learned. They pulsed with quick, bright flashes. Right now, they were practically strobing with entertainment. One of them, a swirling mass of green and gold light, descended closer to the human group. "Such dense, heavy creatures," it said, its voice like the sound of electricity crackling. "How do they even move with all that solid matter weighing them down?" The other Luxani flickered with what Jake was beginning to recognize as laughter. Over the next few weeks, Jake threw himself into training with everything he had. The physical challenges were unlike anything Earth had prepared him for. The Academy's gravity could be adjusted to match any planet in the galaxy, and the instructors seemed to take pleasure in cranking it up just high enough to make the humans struggle. During combat simulations, Jake found himself consistently scoring in the middle of the pack. Not terrible, but not impressive either. He watched as Veltar cadets moved through obstacle courses like living battering rams, their crystalline bodies able to absorb impacts that would shatter human bones. The Luxani could slip through spaces no solid being could fit through, and their energy forms made them nearly impossible to hit with conventional weapons. Meanwhile, Jake and his human classmates sweated, stumbled, and fought for every point they earned. Instructor Kelvas, spider-like being with 6 arms and compound eyes, seemed particularly unimpressed with human performance. After one particularly brutal training session where Jake had managed to complete the course but finished dead last, the instructor's mechanical voice droned through the translation system. "Perhaps humans are better suited for support roles," Kelvas muttered, not even bothering to look directly at Jake. "Communications, maybe? Or supply management? Leave the real fighting to species actually built for combat." Jake felt something hot and angry rise in his chest, but he bit his tongue and kept his expression neutral. Around him, his fellow humans did the same. They'd learned quickly that showing emotion only seemed to confirm what the aliens already believed about human weakness. But late at night in the human dormitory, when the alien instructors weren't watching, Jake practiced. They all did. Beth worked on her marksmanship until her hands bled. Ryan pushed himself through strength training that would have impressed his old football coaches. Lisa studied alien combat tactics until her eyes burned from screen time. They were going to prove these aliens wrong, even if it killed them. 3 weeks of grueling training had passed when Jake found himself strapped into the transport ship, heading toward Kepler-4 for to see. The moon looked like a nightmare from the viewport, a dead, rocky world covered in jagged crystal formations that jutted up from the surface like broken teeth. The atmosphere was thin enough that they needed breathing masks, and the temperature readings showed it was cold enough to freeze human blood in minutes. First live fire exercise, announced Sergeant Major Veltar Korthan, his diamond body reflecting the ship's interior lights as he moved between the seats. Real weapons, real targets, real consequences. The Separatist forces have been using this moon as a training ground. Your job is to clear them out. Jake checked his weapon for the 100th time. The plasma rifle felt heavy in his hands, its alien design still unfamiliar even after weeks of practice. Next to him sat Crixinal, a Veltar warrior whose crystalline form was covered in intricate battle scars that told stories of previous conflicts. The alien's diamond fingers clicked against his own massive energy weapon as he performed his own equipment check, floating near the ceiling. Fiara drifted in. Slow circles. The Luxani scout's energy form had shifted to a deep blue color that Jake had learned meant focused concentration. Her voice crackled through the comm system like distant lightning. Thermal signatures detected across the landing zone, she reported, her form pulsing with each word. Multiple hostile positions, heavy weapons emplacements. This will not be the simple training exercise they promised us. The transport shuddered as it entered the moon's atmosphere. Through the small windows, Jake could see the crystalline formations growing larger and more detailed. Some of them were natural, formed by millions of years of geological processes. Others had clearly been carved and shaped by intelligent hands, creating perfect defensive positions among the rocks. 30 seconds to drop, called the pilot. Jake's heart hammered in his chest. All around him, alien cadets were preparing in their own ways. The Veltar were synchronizing their internal crystalline matrices, a process that made their bodies ring like massive bells. The Luxani were shifting their energy frequencies to combat settings, their forms becoming brighter and more focused. The humans just checked their gear one more time and tried not to throw up. The landing was rough. Transport's engines screamed. As they fought against the moon's gravity, and Jake felt his stomach drop as they touched down with a bone-jarring impact, the rear doors hissed open, and suddenly they were breathing recycled air through breathing masks and squinting against the alien sunlight. Move out, Sergeant Major Korthan's voice boomed across the landing zone. Squad leaders, establish your perimeters. Remember your training, and remember that your instructors are watching everything. Jake's mixed species squad consisted of 8 beings from 4 different worlds. Besides himself, Crixinal, and Fiara, there were 2 more humans, Beth Miller and Ryan Clark, along with an insect-like Zephyrian named Clicktar, and 2 more Veltar warriors. They'd trained together for weeks, but this was their first time facing real danger as a unit. The first few hours went smoothly. They moved through the crystal formations in standard tactical formation, with Fiara scouting ahead in her energy form and the Veltar warriors taking point with their nearly indestructible bodies. Jake and the other humans provided covering. Fire and handled the technical equipment that the aliens found. It's difficult to operate with their non-standard appendages. The Separatist forces had been using the moon for months. Their defensive positions were well established. Hidden bunkers had been carved into the crystal formations, connected by tunnels that allowed the enemy to move unseen between positions. The first sign of trouble came when Fiara's scouting report crackled over the comm. Multiple energy signatures moving through the tunnel systems, she reported, her voice tight with concern. They know we're here, and they're repositioning to surround us. That's when the shooting started. The first plasma bolt screamed over. Jake's head so close he could feel the heat through his helmet. The energy blast hit a crystal formation behind him and turned a chunk of rock the size of a car into glowing vapor. Contact left. Beth's voice cut through the comm system as more enemy positions opened fire. The world around them erupted into chaos as plasma bolts, particle beams, and exotic energy weapons lit up the battlefield like a deadly light show. Jake's squad scrambled for cover behind the nearest crystal formations. But the Separatists had chosen their positions well. Crossfire came from multiple directions, and the crystal formations that provided cover also trapped them in a killing zone. "We need to move," Jake shouted over the weapon's fire. "They've got us pinned down." That's when he saw it. A massive energy cannon, easily the size of a small building, slowly turning toward their position. The weapon's barrel was already beginning to glow with the telltale signs of a charging plasma blast. "Everybody down!" Jake screamed, but he knew it was already too late. The cannon fired with a sound like the world ending. A crackling sphere of superheated plasma, easily 3 feet across, came screaming toward their position. Jake threw himself sideways with every ounce of strength he had. But the blast was too big and too fast. The plasma bolt caught him square in the chest and sent him flying backward into the rocks like a broken doll. The impact was so powerful that even Crixenol, standing 20 feet away, felt his crystalline form crack from the shock wave alone. The smoke rising from Jake's armor created a gray cloud that drifted across the battlefield like a ghost. His squad members stared in complete silence, their weapons forgotten as they processed what they had just witnessed. The plasma bolt had hit with the force of a small meteor, leaving a smoking crater where the center of his chest plate used to be. Melted metal and ceramic armor fragments were scattered across the crystal formations behind him. Crixenol's diamond body was still ringing from the shockwave, hairline cracks running across his left shoulder where the impact had damaged even his nearly indestructible form. The Veltar warrior had seen plasma bolts before, when he knew exactly what they could do. To living tissue, any member of his species would have been instantly vaporized. The Luxani scout Fiara was flickering between colors rapidly. Her energy form destabilized by the shock of watching what should have been a fatal impact. Then Jake coughed. It started as a wet, raspy sound that barely carried over the ongoing weapons fire around them. Then he rolled over, his movements slow and painful, like someone learning to move their body for the first time. Chunks of destroyed armor fell away from his torso as he shifted, revealing the extent of the damage underneath. The sight should have been impossible. Where the plasma bolt had struck, Jake's combat suit was completely gone, burned away, along with several layers of the tactical vest underneath. The skin across his chest was angry red and black, with patches where the heat had gone deep enough to reach muscle and bone. But somehow, impossibly, he was still breathing. "Thompson." Beth's voice cracked over the radio, high-pitched with panic. "Stay down, don't move. We'll get a medic to you." Jake pushed himself up to his knees, his right hand pressing against the ground for support while his left arm hung completely useless at his side. Blood was running down from somewhere on his head, mixing with sweat and the condensation from his damaged breathing mask. When he tried to speak, his voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Negative." He managed to grunt, the single word taking enormous effort. Every breath felt like swallowing broken glass, but he forced himself to continue. "We move now, or we all die here." The Separatist forces weren't going to give them time to recover. Already, Jake could hear the sound of boots on crystal as enemy soldiers moved to surround their position. More plasma bolts were beginning to rain down on their location, each one getting closer as the attackers adjusted their aim. Jake somehow managed to get to his feet. The movement should have been impossible with his injuries, but pure stubborn determination kept him upright. His rifle, which had been thrown clear by the blast, lay several feet away. He stumbled toward it, his legs shaking with each step. "Sir, you need medical attention immediately," Crixenol said, his translated voice carrying undertones of disbelief. "Your body has sustained damage that would kill any warrior I have ever known. We'll get medical attention when we're not all about to die," Jake replied, bending down to retrieve his weapon. The movement sent waves of pain through his entire body, but his grip on the rifle remained steady. "Fiera, what's our escape route?" The Luxani scout was still flickering with shock, but she managed to focus enough to scan the surrounding area. "There is a canyon system, 2 kilometers to the east," she reported. "But the terrain between here and there is completely exposed. We will be under fire the entire way." "Then we better move fast," Jake said, already starting to limp toward the eastern ridge. "Stay low. Use whatever cover you can find, and keep moving no matter what happens." What followed was 12 hours of the most brutal march any of them had ever experienced. Jake led from the front, his damaged body somehow continuing to function. Despite injuries that should have killed him within minutes, every step left bloody footprints in the crystal dust. Every breath came with a wet, rattling sound that made his squad members wince. But he never stopped moving. The Separatist forces pursued them relentlessly, forcing the squad to take cover behind crystal formations, in shallow caves, and sometimes just in depressions in the ground. Jake coordinated their movements with hand signals when his voice gave out completely, his tactical mind somehow becoming clearer and more focused as his physical condition deteriorated. During the 3rd hour, when enemy snipers had them pinned down in a narrow ravine, Jake crawled on his belly across 50 meters of open ground to flank their position. His left arm was completely useless, but he managed to take out 3 enemy soldiers with precise rifle shots before they even knew he was there. By the 6th hour, when they had to cross an exposed valley with no cover, Jake was moving purely on willpower. His face had gone pale from blood loss, and his breathing had become so labored that each exhale created small clouds of red mist. But when Ryan Clark tried to take point, Jake simply shook his head and kept walking. The alien cadets in his squad began to understand that they were witnessing something beyond their comprehension. Humans, they realized, didn't just endure damage the way other species did. They seemed to become more dangerous when wounded, more determined when facing impossible odds. As the sun began to set over Kepler-4 to see, casting long shadows across the crystal formations, Jake finally allowed himself to collapse behind the safety of their extraction point. He had kept them all alive through sheer force of will, leading them through 12 hours of hell with injuries that would have hospitalized any other being in the galaxy. But even as the medical team rushed toward him with emergency equipment, Jake was still trying to give orders, still making sure his squad was safe before he would accept help for himself. The medical bay at the Galactic Defense Academy had never seen anything quite like this. Dr. Lisa Park, one of the few human medical officers on staff, worked frantically alongside a team of Veltar medics whose crystalline hands moved with precise mechanical efficiency. The room buzzed with the sounds of alien medical equipment, devices that hummed, clicked, and pulsed with energies that human science was only beginning to understand. Jake lay on a medical table that had been specially designed to accommodate multiple alien physiologies. The table itself seemed to be alive, the tendrils of some biomechanical material that monitored his vital signs and adjusted its surface to provide optimal support. Around him, holographic displays showed 3-dimensional images of his internal organs, rotating slowly as the alien scanners mapped every inch of damage. The sight was horrifying to anyone who understood anatomy. Where the plasma bolt had struck, Jake's chest looked like a war zone. The scanner images showed layers of burned tissue, fractured bones, and damaged organs that painted a picture of injuries that should have been instantly fatal. 3rd-degree plasma burns across 40% of his torso, reported Chief Medical Officer Veltar Quindel, his diamond form refracting the medical bay's lights into rainbow patterns on the walls. Fractured ribs in 6 places, collapsed left lung, severe damage to the heart muscle, and burns that penetrate clear to the bone. In some areas, the Veltar medic's translated voice carried a tone of professional bewilderment as he continued his report. Internal bleeding in multiple organs, damage to the central nervous system, and energy residue from the plasma blast that is still causing cellular disruption. By all calculations and medical knowledge available to this facility, Cadet Thompson should have died instantly upon impact. Floating near the ceiling, Dr. Ziona pulsed with rapid color changes that indicated extreme confusion. The Luxani physician was one of the most respected medical experts in the galaxy. Her energy-based physiology, allowing her to interface directly with most alien medical equipment, But right now, she was completely baffled by what she was observing. "How? Does this organism continue to function?" she asked, her voice crackling through the translation system like distant thunder. His internal systems show massive trauma, yet his brain activity remains normal. His heart is damaged but still beating. His lungs are compromised but still processing oxygen. This defies everything we understand about biological systems. Jake, despite the protests of every medical professional in the room, was sitting upright on the examination table. His torso was wrapped in some kind of alien healing gel that glowed with a soft blue light. And breathing tubes ran from his nose to a machine that was helping his damaged lungs process oxygen. But his eyes were alert and focused, and he had refused every attempt to sedate him. "Human bodies don't shut down easy, Doc," Jake said, his voice still rough and wheezy from his damaged lung. "We're built redundant. 2 kidneys when we only need 1, backup systems for most of our major organs, and a nervous system that just refuses to quit." Dr. Lisa Park looked up from the scanner readings she had been studying for the past hour. As a human physician working with alien technology, she had become something of an expert in explaining human physiology to species that found it completely alien. "What Jake is saying is true," she explained to the assembled alien medical staff. "Human evolution took a very different path from most species in the galaxy. We developed on a world that was constantly trying to kill us. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, climate changes. Our bodies adapted to survive damage that would be instantly fatal to most other life forms." She pulled up a holographic comparison showing human anatomy next to that of several alien species. The differences were striking. Where Veltar had single, highly efficient organs made of living crystal, humans had multiple redundant systems. Where Luxani had distributed consciousness across their entire energy matrix, humans had backup neural pathways that could reroute around damaged brain tissue. "Look at the cardiovascular system," Dr. Park continued, highlighting the relevant areas in the hologram. "Humans have multiple pathways for blood circulation. Even with significant heart damage, the body can reroute blood flow through secondary channels. The respiratory system has similar redundancies even with a collapsed lung. A human can survive on the remaining capacity while their body begins emergency repairs." A young Veltar medic named Korthix stepped closer to examine Jake. "Directly, but the pain levels," he said, his diamond features reflecting his confusion. "Our scans indicate that you should be experiencing agony beyond the ability of any conscious mind to process." "How are you remaining coherent?" Jake actually managed a weak smile. "Pain is just information, Doc. It tells you something's wrong. But it doesn't have to control what you do about it. Humans have been dealing with pain and injury for millions of years. We learned to work through it, fight through it, think through it." The room fell silent as the alien medical staff processed this information. They began running new tests, not just to treat Jake's injuries, but to understand how human physiology actually worked. What they discovered revolutionized their understanding of what they had considered primitive biology. Humans, they learned, had an almost supernatural ability to compartmentalize pain and continue functioning. Their adrenal systems could flood their bodies with chemicals that not only masked pain but actually enhanced physical performance under stress. Their brains could literally shut down non-essential functions and redirect all available energy toward survival. "This is remarkable," Dr. Ziona pulsed, her energy form brightening with excitement. "Your species doesn't just endure damage, you adapt to it in real time. Oh. Your body is actively restructuring its internal functions to work around the injuries." Over the next several hours, as the alien medical team worked to heal Jake's wounds, using technology that seemed like magic to human eyes, they began to understand something profound. What they had mistaken for weakness in human cadets was actually restraint. Humans weren't struggling to keep up with alien physical capabilities. They were holding back to avoid revealing just how resilient they actually were. The revelation spread through the academy like wildfire. The species that other aliens had dismissed as soft and fragile was actually one of the most durable forms of life in the galaxy. And if humans could survive injuries that would kill anyone else, what did that mean for their potential as soldiers, explorers, and allies? Jake, still refusing sedation despite his doctor's protests, watched the alien medical staff work with growing understanding in their eyes. He had just changed everything these beings thought they knew about humanity, and he was already planning to get back to training as soon as possible. 2 weeks had passed since Jake's impossible march across Kepler-4 to see, and the academy felt like a completely different place. Word of what had happened had spread through every dormitory, every training facility, and every alien species represented. At the school, the human who had taken a plasma blast that should have killed him instantly, and then led his squad through 12 hours of hell, had become something of a legend. Now Jake stood in the academy's Grand Council chamber, a massive, circular room with walls made of the same shifting alien metal as the main hall. The chamber could accommodate beings of all sizes and physiologies, with floating platforms for energy-based species and reinforced floors for the heavier crystalline races. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat in judgment, their various forms of alien architecture creating a sight that still took Jake's breath away. The scars across his chest were still visible through the specially designed uniform that allowed for his healing bandages. The alien medical technology had worked miracles, but some damage was simply too severe to erase completely. Jake would carry the marks of that plasma blast for the rest of his life. Somehow, he found that he didn't mind. They were proof of something important, that humans could take the worst the galaxy had to offer and keep moving forward. Commander Veltar Nixara stood at the center of the chamber, his diamond body catching and reflecting the light from dozens of different sources. But something had changed in the way he carried himself. The arrogant dismissal that had characterized his previous interactions with humans was completely gone, replaced by something Jake had never expected to see in those crystalline features: genuine respect. Cadet Thompson, the commander began, his translated voice carrying none of its previous condescension. Your actions on Kepler-4 to see have been reviewed by this council. You saved the lives of 12 alien cadets from 4 different species, secured valuable intelligence about separatist operations, and demonstrated combat effectiveness under conditions that should have been fatal. But he couldn't help noticing how the other council members were looking at him. The insect-like Zephyrians were clicking their mandibles, and what he had learned was a sign of approval. The energy-based Lixani were pulsing with steady, respectful colors instead of the amused flickering he was used to seeing. Even the massive, bear-like Garani were showing signs of what passed for admiration in their culture. We have underestimated your species, Commander Nixara continued, and Jake could hear something that might have been embarrassment in the translated voice. What we interpreted as weakness in training was actually restraint. You were not struggling to keep pace with your alien classmates, you were holding back. The admission sent ripples of conversation through the assembled council members. For months, human cadets had been placed in support roles, deemed too fragile for frontline combat positions. The assumption had been that humans were intelligent, but physically inferior, suitable for technical work, but not for the brutal realities of galactic warfare. The medical analysis of your injuries has revolutionized our understanding of human physiology, added Dr. Ziona, her energy form brightening as she spoke. Your species possesses redundant biological systems and pain, tolerance that exceeds anything we have encountered in our databases. You do not simply endure damage, you adapt to it and continue functioning at near-optimal levels. Jake finally spoke, his voice steady and clear. With respect, sir, what happened on that moon wasn't special. Any human in my squad would have done the same thing. We're taught from childhood that you don't quit when things get tough. You find a way forward, no matter what. The chamber fell silent as the alien council members processed this information. The idea that Jake's performance wasn't exceptional by human standards, but rather typical of his species, was almost too much for them to comprehend. Effective immediately, Commander Nixara announced. You are promoted to squad leader and assigned to command Alpha Squadron, a new mixed-species unit designed to test advanced combat tactics. You will have full authority to select your team, members, and design your training protocols. As Jake left the council chamber, he noticed something that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. Alien cadets were stepping aside as he passed, not out of dismissal or disgust, but out of respect. Veltar warriors whose diamond bodies made them nearly indestructible nodded to him as he walked by. Laxani scouts pulsed with respectful colors. When they saw him coming in the human dormitory, his fellow cadets greeted him with excitement and pride. Beth Miller, who had been relegated to communications duty, had just received orders to join a frontline assault unit. Ryan Clark was being transferred to the Academy's elite heavy weapons program. Lisa Park had been invited to join the tactical planning division as an equal partner with alien strategists. The change wasn't limited to individual assignments. Throughout the Academy, training protocols were being revised to account for human capabilities that had been previously ignored. Combat scenarios that had been considered too dangerous for human participation were now being opened up. Academic courses that had focused on alien physiologies were being expanded to include human biology as a subject worth serious study. Jake's personal quarters had been upgraded to officer-level accommodations, but he spent most of his time in the common areas helping other human cadets prepare for their new opportunities. The Academy's alien population was beginning to understand that humans brought something unique to galactic civilization, not just intelligence or technical skill, but an almost supernatural refusal to accept defeat as he prepared for sleep. That night, Jake looked out his window at the alien stars visible from the Academy's location. Somewhere out there, separatist forces and other threats to galactic peace were planning their next moves. But they would now have to account for something they had never faced. Before humans who had stopped pretending to be fragile, the human who had taken a hit that would hospitalize most had indeed just kept walking. And in doing so, he had changed. Not just how aliens saw humanity, but how humans saw themselves. They were no longer the weak newcomers, struggling to prove themselves worthy of galactic society. They were the species that simply refused to quit, no matter what the universe threw at them, and that Jake realized might just make them the most dangerous allies the galaxy had ever seen.